Earlier this week, we received news that Bob Murray, the board chairman of Murray Energy, the largest privately owned and now bankrupt U.S. coal operator, died this past Sunday at the age of 80. Cause of death? Well, none was officially given, but we do know that he filed for black lung benefits, which is funny because he spent most of his career fighting them. In fact, he routinely opposed any sort of regulation of the coal industry and even sent Donald Trump a 4-page action plan calling for environmental and mine safety regulation rollbacks. Of these, half were granted, including revoking the Clean Power Plan and withdrawal from the Paris Agreement. Without a doubt, this man did more to impede environmental efforts than most individuals in history. But with his passing, we can further progress toward a cleaner future. Solar stocks recently took a beating on Wall Street as investors weighed the possibility of a Trump win, even though the polls show Biden leading nationally, echoing Hillary's lead over Trump in the polls back in 2016, yet she lost the election. Perhaps this is the reason for record voter turnout prior to the election, as people are simply not intent on repeating the last election. We cannot afford another 4 years of this man in the Oval. However, what most do not realize is that for renewables, it really doesn't matter who wins in the long term, since the shift is already in progress. Despite Trump's promises to revive the coal industry and save fossil fuels, it's not really working. A new report from Rethink X shows that by 2030, electricity systems comprised entirely of solar, wind, and batteries can provide both the cheapest power available and 2 to 3 times more total energy than the existing grid in the continental United States, bankrupting coal, gas, and nuclear plants in most populated regions globally in the process. Even states like Texas and Iowa, which are known to be conservative states, are embracing wind and solar. Iowa in particular is close to finishing its largest solar power plant, dubbed the Wapello Solar Project, which is a 127.5 megawatt solar project in Louisa County, and has a capacity to power around 45,000 homes. They are doing this with the help of renewable energy company Clenera and RES, Renewable Energy Systems. And it should be operational by the end of this year. Now, mind you, construction for this project started in June 2020. So that's quite the turnaround right there. In comparison, coal and nuclear power plants, they can take 5+ years to construct. In some cases, 8, 9, it's basically a long time. And they are much more complex, not to mention expensive, especially as renewables become overwhelmingly cheaper in comparison. This project also hired 200+ workers, which disproves the notion that renewables are bad for the energy industry. In fact, it's the complete opposite. Like I mentioned in my previous podcast, solar jobs had basically twice as many workers than coal workers in that industry and 4 times as many workers in the nuclear sector. That was back in 2018. So renewables create plenty more jobs. There's a lot more opportunity out there. And in addition to that, this project will create $5.2 million in tax revenue. So I think the solar stocks will be fine, in case people were concerned with the recent drop, because there is so much more untapped potential out there that investors are just not seeing right now. Now, Tesla recently updated its capital expenditure guidance to confirm a plan to invest up to $12 billion on its new electric car and battery factories in just 2 years. Now, what I love about Tesla is that unlike other big companies out there, which they really just take their profits and buy back their own stock, Tesla takes basically all the money it has and reinvests it into its research and development in an effort to improve its products and gain a technological advantage. And they've done this so well that now other companies like Mercedes, they're giving up on their uh, autopilot or self-driving technology because they simply just cannot keep up. They're so ahead of the game, and this also applies for Tesla's battery tech. It's incredibly advanced and ahead of its time, at least compared to where the other companies are. So this is truly exciting because that is a big investment that will only grow dividends for the company in the years to come. So that's awesome news there. And furthermore, a Tesla energy storage project with megapacks is currently being installed in Santa Barbara County to increase the grid resilience in the region to the tune of 40 megawatt hours. This is essential because that region is subject to a lot of instabilities in regards to its power because of earthquakes, wildfires, you name it. So this is integral to ensuring grid optimization and stability as climate change aggravates a lot of these natural disasters and weather-related issues that are really pounding the state there. So what's even more exciting on top of that is that, energy storage has definitely become a big talking point and a big component of renewables, but now even the Army is getting involved. So the US Army, they have an investment of about $7.2 million over a period of 5 to 10 years to power a whole new generation of electronic gear in the field. Now, I expect that this amount will actually increase as time goes on here because they'll realize how great this could be and how beneficial it could be to the military as well in terms of their operations, missions, etc. Because up until now, most military gear was powered with disposable batteries, which are not very sustainable. But what about batteries that can be recharged? They're lightweight, but also charged by renewable power. And that's where they're headed. So this need for rechargeable lightweight battery tech is mission critical. And the fact that the military is getting involved is exciting because much of this technological progress can seep over into everyday life and devices like our smartphones. Even the sunglasses we wear today originally came from the same tech astronauts used on their helmet screens to shield against excessive UV radiation. And even under the Trump administration, the Department of Defense is still engaged in extricating itself from fossil fuel dependency, rolling out a pretty significant initiative based around a solar plus storage effort that pairs the Department of Defense with the nation's sprawling network of about 900 rural electric cooperatives covering well more than half the US landmass and serving a population of 42 million people. In short, when the military gets involved, it's serious, and I'm excited to see what developments come out of this. And speaking of rural, it seems that farmers will have much more revenue coming in the form of two new cash crops, wind and solar. In fact, it's expected actually that revenue from corn and soy will eventually be overtaken by revenue bought in from wind and solar, especially as they are subject to less volatility through long-term power purchase contracts, whereas corn and soy, they're subject to geopolitical tension, changing commodity prices. It's a pain. So definitely renewables are becoming more and more integrated into our lives and in ways we never really expected. And did anyone see this coming? I didn't. Cash crops, wind and solar, that doesn't even sound right, but hey, if they're earning money off it, why not? So although renewables are making much progress, clearly we still have a lot of issues related to climate change. It's not stopping. So when the topic of wildfires is brought up, California usually comes to mind, not Colorado. Yet the inferno rages on there as well. Due to intense drought and increased presence of tree-killing bark beetles due to warmer than average temperatures, just like we discussed, that's happening over in California, The state is witnessing 3 of its largest wildfires in its history this year alone. And 2 of those fires, the Cameron Peak Fire and the East Troublesome Fire, continue to burn out of control. I mean, even with a foot of snowfall helping firefighter efforts, the East Troublesome Fire is only 37% contained as of this Saturday morning, burning 193,774 acres, while the Cameron Peak Fire is 64% contained, so I guess a little bit better, still not great, and burning 208,663 acres. Truth be told, if it was not for the snow or the colder winds, it would have been much worse, so thank God. Yet, containment efforts cannot continue to rely on snowfall, as climate change is only going to get worse. And this is definitely a sign of that, with the fires burning so close to the winter season. I mean, how much longer will we deny the science? How much longer will we continue to scapegoat forest management, democratic leadership, and just admit that our species is impacting the global climate and the events around us? It's not really hard. And of course, California, Oregon, and Washington, they're all still on fire as well. Just because we're not talking about it as much doesn't mean the problem got any better. Actually, if you take a look at the wildfires map, it looks like the western half of the country is burning. And these wildfires could very likely be the norm for these states moving forward, like hurricanes are now becoming for Louisiana, who is being hit by its 3rd hurricane and 5th major storm this year, and experiencing its 7th evacuation. I mean, imagine a future where some of these areas become simply uninhabitable due to the frequency, severity of natural disasters and events. I mean, it's hard to think about, yet that seems to be where we're headed. And while this is happening, Trump fired the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Chief Scientist Craig McLean and proceeded to install new political staff who question accepted facts about climate change, aka climate deniers. The reason, with the upcoming 5th National Climate Assessment, which is essentially a check on the nation of how it's doing in terms of climate change, this is part of the U.S. Global Change Research Program. And for this assessment, McLean essentially asked the administration to acknowledge the NOAA's scientific integrity policy ahead of time, which basically states, don't deny climate change or downplay the science. In response, unsurprisingly, the administration fired McLean and began packing the NOAA with climate denialists. And the concern here is that once they are hired onto these positions, it's really hard to remove them, even if Trump is not reelected. This is similar to Trump's efforts to confirm Amy Coney Barrett into the U.S. Supreme Court. So even if he loses the election, his legacy will continue to affect the country's laws for some time, as well as environmental policies. However, as long as Trump does not win a second term, further consequences can be averted. With that said, please vote and make your voices heard. This could be one of the most important elections of our lives.